With Rick's absence in the majority of Season 9 and all the way up to present day, he was missing for a lot of the things that happened. Probably the biggest thing he missed, other than, the birth of his son, was the conflict against the Whisperers. While the characters we did have eventually won against the Whisperers, I can't help but wonder how it all would have went down if Rick was still in the show. There's a few different options I can think of from the Rick that we saw in Season 9 and how he would have handled that situation. But if you're new to the channel, I'm the Thrifty Typewriter. I make all sorts of content related to fantasy, mystery, and sci-fi, including The Walking Dead, so if those are things that interest you, consider hitting that subscribe button, and let's get on with the video. When we see Rick in Season 9 of The Walking Dead, he's a very different Rick from, well, this Rick, but even the Rick he was just the season before. He's not only determined to rebuild the world and live in peace, but he's determined to keep law and order around the communities. The Whisperers pose a direct threat not only to the safety, but the ability to keep that law and order from actually happening. After everything Rick has lost, he wouldn't take too kindly to some group of freaks dressed as walkers, messing up the vision that Carl had for the future. After the first encounter with the Whisperers, Rick would have done one of two things, and I'm going to go over both of those options. Option 1. Rick launches a full-scale attack, thinking that he can overpower the Whisperers. He forms a plan and goes into Whisperer territory to wipe them out. They take out a majority of the Whisperers, but underestimate their abilities and their horde. The Whisperers fight back with their horde. It wipes out several of the communities until they all band together to fight the horde. In this scenario, I actually think it would be Rick's idea to let Negan join them in the fight, because his tactics and his mind would be very useful. The Whisperers are crafty, as we've seen with them capturing the people to put their heads on pikes, and Beta infiltrating Alexandria. You can bet they would use some of those same tactics, but Rick would have everyone on full alert. He would revert back to who he was in Seasons 5 and 6, but this time, I don't think the Whisperers are as big of a threat as the Saviors with their lack of guns, and with the leadership of Rick and his tactics, the Whisperer War would be bloody, with lives lost, but I don't think anybody would have had their heads on pikes, though it would also take a long time to rebuild what they lost, which would go against what Rick was trying to preserve in the first place. Option 2. Rick learns from his mistakes in the past, i.e. attacking the Saviors and underestimating them, and he doesn't retaliate at first. He tries to reason with Alpha, agrees to her borders, and respects those boundaries, anything to preserve the safety and well-being of the communities that he's the leader of. But then there's the question of Lydia, because that storyline would still happen regardless of if Rick was or wasn't there. Rick would still take her in because that's who Rick is. He would have to grapple with the fact that Lydia would cause the downfall of all these communities, but once he sees who Alpha really is, he would certainly take Lydia in. This would cause a huge problem between Alpha and Rick. He would realize that he would have to strike not only first, but smartly. Similar to how he does in Option 1, Rick would devise a plan to attack the Whisperers, but it would be of sound mind. He wouldn't revert back to who he was in Seasons 5 and 6, but he would conduct this battle with the mindset of preserving all life and communities. He would strike them all, perhaps defeating the entirety of the Whisperers in a single battle, because he knows if he didn't, the retaliation would be extreme. If he didn't kill them all because of either their craftiness or because of the horde, then preserving the communities would come first. Rick would have everybody retreat to one safe place, whether that be Hilltop, Alexandria, or maybe even the Sanctuary, having that act as a Helm's Deep for the Whisperer battle. This would be where Negan's help would truly come in if they did go to the Sanctuary. With the combined forces of all the communities, we would see a battle like we did in Season 10 at Hilltop, but it would be at the Sanctuary instead. And after a long and bloody battle, Rick and the communities would come out on top. I know that the Sanctuary might not be the best place to go geographically, but I think thematically it would work very well and also act, like I said, as a Helm's Deep for this battle against the Whisperers. The Whisperers might have gone from community to community, wiping them out to make the conditions unlivable, and I think if that did happen, then Rick would either expand Alexandria or Hilltop to make it so that way everybody can live under one roof. Perhaps they even scout somewhere new to move and create a place just like the Commonwealth, or maybe they even just go join the actual Commonwealth. Rick would have changed the entire outcome of the Whisperer War. Would there have been casualties? Yes. Would the Pike scene still have happened? Maybe, but just for show entertainment purposes, but I think Rick might have actually been able to avoid it entirely. I know that Rick is in the comics during the Whisperer storyline, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't read the comics and I don't know the specifics of what he does differently and compared to what happens in the show. This is just sort of my idea of what I think Rick would have done if he was still in the show. Where Rick is, we still don't know, and will he return to The Walking Dead? I think yes, he will. There's been a lot of clues to his return, and I think if The Walking Dead wants to go out on a high note, then we will at the very least get a glimpse of him during the course of season 11. I'd love for it to be him reuniting with everybody and coming back with Michonne, but I'm not too sure how likely that actually is. If you want to see more of my thoughts on Rick coming back into the show, I made a separate video on that, and I'll leave a card for it in the top right corner of the video, and I'll also leave it at the very end. What are your thoughts on Rick and what he would have done differently if he were around when the Whisperers were there? Do either of these options sound better to you, or do you have your own idea of what would have happened? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more Walking Dead content, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah.